All right, here's my presentation on Chapter 5, the 5 socio-technology trends that we as educators need to be aware of so that we are preparing students for the 21st century rather than the 20th or even the 19th. We need to be aware of changing technologies and use them to benefit students rather than resist and avoid new technologies because they're scary and change is hard. We need to embrace them and realize that the students of today are very, very different from the students of just 2 decades ago. Now, the author of this chapter is quick to point out that this does not mean that we are replacing traditional content, and he mentioned like basic addition and subtraction. Rather, it involves supplementing the methods of instruction that we already use to better integrate students who have already grown up with technology. And that's a key point of the chapter, that these kids have never known a world without Google, that they've never known a world without smartphones that have the ability to give you the answer to any question at the drop of a thumb on a screen. It's very simple. And so we need to be aware of that and be able to take advantage of the new types of skills that have become necessary with such technology being prevalent all throughout the world. So the first socio-technological trend that the author mentions is called social production, which he defines as the ability of anyone with an internet connection to create content and distribute it widely with almost no cost whatsoever. He also defines it as learning to do. Information is no longer hierarchical and top-down, controlled by experts, where we have the teacher who is the expert of all knowledge standing at the front of the classroom and telling students what they need to learn. Rather, content is so widely available that it's become decentralized and it's distributed by what we would consider amateurs, not experts. This makes both acquisition and distribution of content much more participatory, meaning that students not only have the opportunity to get content informally, very simply, very quickly, they also have the ability to create it, which is what social production is. We as educators need to both understand this participatory culture and interact with it to make learning more active and interactive. So examples of social production include websites like YouTube. I think that's probably the biggest example. You can find YouTube videos, educational YouTube videos about any topic just about. And one example would be John Green's Crash Course History courses, which I use frequently in my classes when I'm absent and I need something simple for the students to acquire knowledge. There are website creators. I've had my students do this where they create a website using Wix or Weebly to disseminate information. Wikipedia, of course, is another fantastic example of social production. Again, there's no centralization at all. All of the information found on Wikipedia is decentralized and it's produced by amateurs. As this Michael Scott quote exemplifies, Wikipedia is the best thing ever. Anyone in the world can write anything they want about any subject, so you're getting the best possible information. Now, for a teacher reading that can be pretty scary, but it's important to know that students get a lot of information from Wikipedia. So rather than resist, we need to adapt and embrace. Other examples of social production include Khan Academy, blogs, live streaming. There are so many ways for students to get knowledge now, very simply, outside of the textbook and outside of the teacher, that we need to utilize these socially produced pieces of content and also teach students the proper way to navigate them. Because as Michael Scott mentions, anyone can say anything they want. So you need to make sure you're able to verify the information. We also need to be aware that students in many cases are already active social producers. Many of them make YouTube videos. They know how to make websites. They've grown up with this sort of thing. This has enormous potential to help students grow creatively and help them to make their own content through less formal means than like an essay or a paper. We can have students making YouTube videos and podcasts even. Administrators have to be aware of this potential problem. Like there's some legal pitfalls that come with letting students create whatever they want on the internet under the guise of a school project. Once that creation has been posted, it's there to stay. We know the internet is around forever. It can potentially cause online backlash that may spill over onto teachers and school districts if a student posts inappropriate content as part of a school project. So that is a price to pay for the ability for students to produce essentially whatever they want under teacher supervision. So teachers need to be aware of that as well and have strict guidelines as to what is appropriate and what is not appropriate for posting. The second socio-technological trend that the author mentioned was social networks, which the author described as enhancing the process of learning to be. We know the curses, the problems of social media, but there are also many blessings that enable young students to discover their identity. The whole point of a social network is to be social, to connect and to form relationships. As we know, however, it is misused. So we as educators must be familiar with this powerful technology and use it to connect students with each other and with more professional creators of content. Another implication for classroom teachers is this is a lesson that we can be aware of and be able to teach our students of how to post appropriately on social media. What are some things that are okay and not okay to put online? Students nowadays often suffer from oversharing. They post too much on social media, images and status updates and things, words that they would say that they would regret in years to come. We see this happen all the time. I tell my students who are athletes they need to be very careful about what they tweet, because if they ever get to a position where they would want to play professional sports, those tweets can easily be dug up. We see it happen time and again. So being able to teach students how to use social networks properly is an important implication for educators. The third socio-technological trend, and I'm going to be honest, this does not make sense to me at all. Maybe it was just the way the author wrote this. I've read a little bit about what semantic webs are, otherwise known as, sometimes called the Internet of Things. The author describes it as the process of learning to know. Essentially, the internet is trending towards being able to tag every piece of information online and create its own DNA, then connect every part of the internet with another part of the internet. Again, it's really hard to know what exactly this will look like because it doesn't exist yet, but the implication for educators, we need to know that the internet is changing. The way it's going to be used in the future is going to be changing. So we really do need to be flexible and adaptable. We can't be stuck living in the past where we're sitting at the front, direct instruction, read from the textbook, multiple choice quizzes. We need to understand the internet, how it's changing, and how it affects our students. The fourth socio-technological trend the author mentions is called a media grid, which he describes as a three-dimensional representation of space using computing power and the internet. Really, that's just video games. Yeah, he talked a lot about how students, as we are all often painfully aware, spend so much time outside of school playing some form of online game. The biggest example being Fortnite recently, although that's by no means the most popular or the most prevalent at any given time. If we as educators, we would like to complain about video games and how much time our students spend on it outside of class, but really we have an opportunity here to take advantage of something that's already really popular with students and turn it into an educational tool. I know our principal has tried to do this through Fortnite because, as Howard Gardner mentions in the textbook, or is quoted in the textbook, or the book is saying that gaming requires all types of the five minds of the future: the respectful mind, the synthesizing mind, the creative mind, the disciplined mind, and the ethical mind. I've noticed that many of my students who are big-time video gamers have academic abilities. They are interested in learning and knowledge, and there's a whole way to access their interest and engage their creativity by involving some form of game. I call it gamifying the classroom. So using the same skills that are required for video gaming can be beneficial for students and get them, like I said, more engaged in classroom instruction. Most online games involve cooperation, creative thinking, problem solving, which are not only useful for school, but for life beyond. And administrators can use this same sort of thing as well, video game skills for professional development for their teachers, which could, PD days could always use some spicing up. So that's one potential way to do it. I've noticed that when I can get my students playing a game or turning history into a game, they really react and they engage with the content, and it just makes it a much more memorable and fun learning experience for everyone involved. So this is something that we as teachers should be aware of. The fifth socio-technological trend from the chapter was what he calls the new zoo of non-linear learning. He quoted some new scientific research, new areas of science, new fields of study, including gene therapy, nanotechnology, microbiology. He mentioned like the ability to create life, which instantly got me thinking about this scene from Star Wars Revenge of the Sith, where Emperor Palpatine is persuading Anakin Skywalker to turn to the dark side through creating life. So a little bit of creepy evil scientist vibe from this section. The key here is the idea of non-linear learning, where science has many overlapping areas. Social studies has overlapping areas where content, the way we've taught content and subjects for more than a century is we divide it up into content area, English, social studies, math, science. But that linear way, that direct linear model of learning is going away because there's, things bleed into each other. Social studies and English have room for collaboration. New sciences are being developed every day. And so teaching kids, to separate their subjects is going to be detrimental to them for a future world, a changing world. So we need to be aware of and adapt to nonlinear models of learning. So overall application for socio-technological trends for classroom teachers is that we just need to be aware and utilize a wide variety of technologies. We can't be stuck living in the past. I mean, you can never really replace pen and paper, nor should you, but you should, as educators, and be able to incorporate the technologies that our students use every single day and turn it towards something more educational rather than just the brain melting thing that we all assume that it is. We must take advantage of the natural desire to create and enable students to utilize a variety of methods in acquiring, even creating their own educational content. We got to be comfortable with them using and producing things through YouTube, through using social media, as this little, political cartoon kind of mentions, texting with the students. And there are apps to do that. There's all sorts of technologies that we can take advantage of. For building leaders really have the responsibility to bring teachers and students into the 21st century. They need to serve as a role model and as a guide to not live in the past, to not do things the way we've always done things, but to be comfortable with exploring new options and allowing teachers the freedom to explore nonlinear models of learning, because that's the direction technology is taking us. And that is my presentation on the chapter.